An hour later, we sat down to breakfast together. Many of the staff noticed my early return, thinking I was just back for the day. I looked around at the cheerful faces surrounding the table. It warmed my heart. If only other workplaces understood that treating employees well fosters loyalty. All I had done was ask if anyone had concerns, listened to their thoughts, and helped prepare breakfast. Though I had only been here for about a week, they already treated me like family. Still, my thoughts kept drifting back to Mary. Each time she turned red, I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her. She occupied my mind like a gentle melody, echoing through my thoughts. After dinner, I took a stack of dishes to the sink, seeking a little time alone to reflect. That's when an idea struck me. Despite her traditional ways, Mary possessed a sweet charm in how she spoke with others. Maybe I could find some books in the library that would help me learn how to talk to her without feeling awkward. With a polite thank you for breakfast, I headed to the library. I hadn't really paid attention to my steps until I reached the shelves, unsure where to begin my search. What should I look for? Old stories? Tips on manners? My eyes stopped at a section filled with coloring books, and I couldn't help but smile, recalling the last time I had seen her there. Just as I turned to scan another shelf, something caught my eye, a medium-sized book partly hidden behind the others. Bending down, I pulled it out carefully. The back cover had writing I couldn't decipher, but it looked intriguing. When I flipped the book over, I frowned at a single word, shibari. Turning the page, I discovered it was a beginner's guide to Japanese knot techniques. It started off with simple knots and types of rope, discussing sizes and materials, before showcasing pictures that explained the techniques. My heart raced as I recalled the awkward moment when I handed Mary the coloring book. With a sigh, I grabbed a few more books and tucked the shibari guide between them. I had so much to learn, and I didn't want to do it in the library. 3 days passed as I worked through most of the book. It took just as long for my next order to arrive. Thankfully, it came in a plain brown box. I placed the still-sealed box inside my wardrobe, trusting my staff, especially Mary, not to rummage through my belongings. The book opened a new path for me. With my newfound understanding combined with the memories of Mary from that lively evening, I felt ready to learn more about her and what she liked. That evening, I chose to eat alone. Cassandra seemed a bit concerned but accepted my choice without question. It was a change from our usual routine, as she typically joined me for meals. Honestly, if this continued, I would need to discuss it with her. Knock, knock. A smile spread across my face, knowing this was the moment I had been looking forward to. I stood up and walked over to the door, eager to see Mary. "Good evening, sir. I have your meal," she said, her gentle smile brightening the room. However, her eyes barely met mine before she looked down at the floor. I remembered reading that making eye contact can convey respect, and I sensed she was eager to connect but held back by her shyness. "Thank you, Mary," I said, returning her smile and gesturing toward the table. She quickly wheeled the cart into the room and began to set out my food. Once everything was ready, she stepped back to admire her work, looking pleased with herself. As she turned to leave, I called out softly, "Mary." She paused, letting the cart go, and turned back to me, her gaze dropping to the floor between us. A hint of color rose in her cheeks as she asked, "Yes, sir?" "You're very lovely," I said gently, hoping my words would ease her nervousness. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment before she looked down again, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of red. I couldn't help but notice her outfit, a simple black skirt paired with comfortable shoes, and a white blouse that showcased the light freckles on her cheeks. Her long brown hair was neatly tied back, framing her face beautifully. "I'm sorry, Mary. I didn't mean to stop you. I just wondered how your hair would look in a braid," I said kindly, hoping to draw her out of her shell. "Thank you, sir," she replied, a hint of surprise in her voice. I smiled and nodded as she turned and quickly pushed the cart out of the room. Honestly, I wasn't sure how our interaction had gone. If it hadn't been well received, I figured I might hear from Cassandra soon. I kept thinking about it while I ate my meal and during my shower. At least this time, when I crawled into bed, I fell asleep almost immediately, my thoughts swirling with hope and anticipation for the next time I would see Mary. The next morning started just like any other. I woke up, got dressed, and headed to the kitchen. As usual, Mary was already there, her voice filling the room with song. But today, something felt different. Usually, her tunes were sweet and gentle, but this morning, they had a lively, upbeat rhythm that brought a smile to my face. Kenneth looked a bit distracted as I walked in, and I nodded to him. He returned the gesture, but his mind seemed elsewhere. I made my way over to Mary, and as I reached for a knife, I noticed her cheeks flushed a deeper shade of pink. Yet, she kept singing, her voice lifting the mood even more. It was then that I noticed her hair, neatly braided and cascading down her back. I imagined if she let it down, it would reach halfway down her back. I smiled to myself, feeling cheerful as Mary's good mood seemed to uplift everyone in the kitchen. The only moment of awkwardness came when Frank spoke up. "Mary, dear, I don't think that hairstyle is quite right," he commented, a flicker of worry crossing her face. Before she could respond, I chimed in, "Sorry, Frank. That was my idea. I asked her to braid her hair last night because I was curious about how long it was." Everyone's eyes turned to me, surprised, and I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. "What?" I asked, a bit flustered. Thankfully, that was enough to redirect everyone's attention back to their meals. I noticed a small smile aimed in my direction from Mary, and I felt a sense of warmth wash over me as I gently patted her leg. Just then, I thought I felt her fingers brush against mine as I moved away, but when I looked, she was focused back on her work. After breakfast, I helped wash the dishes and decided to learn how to use the dishwasher. Kenneth showed me how to stack the plates on a plastic rack before we pushed it into the machine, lowered the lid, and pressed a big green button to start the hot water cleaning cycle. Meanwhile, Mary carefully washed the fragile items by hand, her focus intent on the sink. Feeling a little bold, I approached her. "Mary," I said quietly as I walked over. She glanced at me and then returned her attention to her work. "Yes, sir?" "When is your next day off?" I asked. "Tomorrow and the next day are my days off," she replied softly. I smiled, feeling the excitement of a new idea forming. "How about we go shopping? I'm still getting used to this place, and I could really use a break, maybe do some shopping and catch a movie." Mary looked a bit shy as she scrubbed a glass. "Sir, why me?" "Why not?" I replied, shrugging. "I enjoy spending time with you. Plus, I want to make sure you're doing all right after everything that happened. We need to get you a nice outfit for the upcoming court date." I didn't notice the slight shiver that ran through her, unaware of the emotion she was grappling with. "If you think it's a good idea, I will go with you," she said finally. I frowned just a little, wanting to ensure she was comfortable. "Mary, it's your day off. I'd love for you to come, but I'm not forcing you, not yet anyway," I joked, hoping to lighten the mood. Mary smiled and nodded softly. "I'll be ready after breakfast." I gave her an appreciative nod and headed off to start my day. First, I made my way to the barn to learn how to saddle one of the big horses. After that, I had my first riding lesson. A wave of nerves washed over me, but Margaret's reassuring words calmed my anxiety. Once I was in the saddle, I quickly began to relax. I had read that these horses were gentle and friendly, and the steady rhythm of their movements was surprisingly comforting. As I rode, I thought about bringing Mary back later to see if she wanted to ride too. I missed lunch with Cassandra that day, but Frank brought me food when I returned. After feeling a bit tired and dusty, I took a refreshing shower. To my surprise, when I returned to my room, I found Cassandra sitting at the edge of my bed. "Sorry, how long have you been here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Not long, she replied, her tone slightly more serious. I need to plan the day for tomorrow. I'm taking your sister shopping and maybe to a movie. It shouldn't be too far. What would you suggest? I asked, unsure how this would go. James, why are you taking my sister? She asked, looking shocked. I shrugged, feeling a sense of responsibility. I feel bad about what happened. Without a job, someone took advantage of her. I wanted to take her out, do some shopping, and make sure she has what she needs. Cassandra nodded, her expression turning more concerned. Sir James, I would like to join you both tomorrow. I smiled, realizing it would be more fun with her along. Sure thing. We're just going for the day. If you could find a place for Mary to get some new clothes, plus lunch and something fun to do, that would be great. Oh, and make sure there's enough for Ben and Greg too. I don't want them to feel left out. I walked over to the table, enjoying a tasty toasted sandwich. I had noticed that the quality of food had improved lately, and I was appreciating the changes. The staff seemed to enjoy it too, and there were clear benefits to buying local. I couldn't shake the feeling that with my new wealth, I wasn't sure if I truly deserved it. After finishing my sandwich, I glanced over to see Cassandra sitting on the edge of my bed with a cheeky smile. I'll let you get organized for tomorrow, I said, heading for the door. Someday, I'll need you to teach me how to plan things like you do. As I stepped out of the room, I heard a soft thud behind me. I snickered, thinking it was probably a pillow tossed my way. My favorite spot, at least for now, was the library. The only person I had seen there before was Mary. As I turned the corner between the shelves, I spotted her. She hadn't noticed me yet, absorbed in flipping through a thick book. I walked closer, and just as I approached, she looked up, sitting up straight, and quickly closed the book, hiding it behind her back. Sir, I didn't see you there, she said quickly, her cheeks slightly flushed. I smiled, trying to ease her embarrassment. I'm sorry to surprise you. You're so talented. I didn't mean to interrupt. Her blush deepened, and she looked down, attempting to hide a smile. She straightened up, appearing more confident, and I was struck by her presence. Sir, why do you want to take me out? I paused, searching for the right words. I want you to feel appreciated and to enjoy your time. You've been through a lot, and you deserve a break. Besides, I think it would be fun to spend time together. Mary's expression softened, and I could see the curiosity in her eyes. That sounds nice, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I grinned, feeling the excitement building within me. Great. I'll see you after breakfast then. With that, I turned to leave, my mind racing with the possibilities of our day together. Will I see you tomorrow? Mary asked quietly, her voice carrying a weight that made me pause. I realized she wasn't just looking for a casual response, she genuinely wanted to know if I would be there. Mary, when I first heard your voice, it felt like I was listening to something truly special, I replied, noticing a blush creeping across her cheeks again. Now, she was looking directly at me, her eyes wide and earnest. When I walked into the kitchen and saw you, I was amazed. You're incredible, and I wanted nothing more than to be close to you. As I continued, I found myself reflecting on our time together. As I've gotten to know you better, I've started to look forward to our little moments, the way you blush when I compliment you, the laughter we share. When I found you that day, I was overwhelmed. Instead of running for help, all I could think about was making sure you were okay. Mary looked puzzled, tilting her head slightly. Sir, I don't understand. Cassandra is already taking care of us. That's why she's here now. I was taken aback. Who told you that? I asked, genuinely surprised. Mary frowned slightly but stood her ground. You don't have to pretend, sir. I'm the one who cleans your room. It took me a moment to process her words, but then it clicked. Mary, I've never had that kind of relationship with your sister. She used my shower once and left some things behind, but that was it. I've never been close to her. I watched her expression change, still doubtful. With a sigh, I decided to explain. Let me clarify how my marriage ended, and why I'm here. Cassandra has been getting a little too friendly with me, and it makes me uneasy. I've been in a similar situation before, and honestly, it didn't end well. But I don't want to lose either of you. You both have become important to me. I froze, suddenly wishing I could take back the last part of my confession. But it was too late. Mary's face cycled through various emotions as I spoke. By the time I finished, she seemed to believe me. Sir, do you know how Cassandra and I ended up here? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, genuinely puzzled. No, I don't. Cassandra is a mail-order bride, she revealed, her voice trembling. I paused, trying to understand her words. It's not what you think, sir, she whispered, her eyes glistening. Our parents were protesters in Ukraine. They peacefully opposed the government, but that put us in danger. I was taken a few months after my 20th birthday. My parents had to give in to save me. My heart sank as she began to cry. I was allowed to see them one last time. They told me to go with Cassandra, she had a way to help me escape. The next day, they were gone. Oh, Mary, you don't have to share this with me, I said gently, wrapping her in my arms. Despite the heavy story she had just told, I felt a warmth as she leaned against me, seeking comfort. Cassandra made some connections, she continued, taking a few deep breaths to steady herself. One person helped us reach a kind and wealthy man from the West. We went to Poland to meet him. He was nice and offered us a place to stay while I waited for Cassandra to come back. I looked down at her, surprised. This explains so much. Cassandra's urgency to get here now made perfect sense. Mary, I'm not asking you to be with me in that way. I'm not asking you to marry me, I said carefully, wanting to make my intentions clear. I won't pressure you. This is your home for as long as you want it, but I would like to spend more time with you. Finally, Mary pulled away, a tear-streaked smile illuminating her face. I would love that, sir, she replied softly. Before I could react, she lightly brushed her lips against mine and then darted out of the library, leaving me momentarily stunned. Once I gathered my thoughts, I looked around the room and noticed a collection of books that piqued my interest. I picked one that seemed appealing and began to read. Today felt different. I had gotten up, showered, dressed, and headed to the kitchen. A small wave of sadness washed over me when I realized I couldn't hear Mary's voice as I entered. As I walked into the kitchen, I greeted Kenneth with my usual morning nod before sitting next to Frank to help prepare the vegetables. Frank wasn't the easiest person to chat with, but he wasn't unpleasant either. I recalled how Mary used to sing sweetly while she worked alongside me. Before long, we finished making breakfast and moved to the dining area. It was a nice surprise to find Mary already seated and waiting for us. I smiled when I saw her outfit, a pair of small brown boots and a delicate blouse that accentuated her features. As I set our meal on the table and took my usual spot next to her, she gave me a quick smile before serving herself. I was surprised when she swapped her full plate for my empty one. It took a moment for me to grasp what she was doing. She had chosen to serve me. A quick glance around the table revealed that nobody else had noticed, except for Frank. "Thank you, Mary," I said quietly, feeling a warmth in my chest. She simply smiled and began to enjoy her food, the conversation flowing easily around us. There was some talk about a possible storm approaching in the next few days, but I didn't pay much attention. It reminded me, though, that I needed to buy some warm clothes for the colder weather ahead. After we finished eating, I helped Kenneth take the dishes back to the kitchen. This time, I didn't linger. I went up to my room, took a shower, and got dressed for a day out. I grabbed a small suitcase to bring back anything I might buy and, as an afterthought, tossed Mary's teddy bear into it. When I went downstairs, I found Frank in conversation with Greg and Ben. "Ah, good, you're ready, sir," Frank said with a slight bow. "The car is ready, we're just waiting for the ladies." "I'm here," Mary called out, hurrying from the hallway. I smiled as she approached us, with Cassandra trailing behind her, looking a bit nervous. Cassandra smiled politely at me, but something seemed to weigh on her mind. "Good morning, ladies. Are we ready to go?" I asked cheerfully. Mary nodded with her usual smile, while Cassandra mumbled about not being a morning person. I shrugged, motioning for Ben and Greg to lead the way. "I'll let you know when we're heading back, Frank," I said, giving him a wave. "Enjoy your trip, sir," he replied. As I walked alongside Mary and Cassandra, I couldn't shake the thought that these people had lives outside of this place, but for now, our journey together was just beginning. As we climbed into the back seat of the large four-wheel drive, I couldn't shake the thought, did they really get to do anything fun? I settled into the back with Cassandra, who was sitting across from me, while Mary squeezed in between us. I could see the nervous look on Cassandra's face as Ben and Greg took their seats in the front without uttering a word. Ben started driving, and the vehicle picked up speed, making the familiar route to the airstrip in about 15 minutes. I could feel a rush of excitement. I was still surprised that I owned a private jet. As we arrived, I didn't wait for anyone to open the door. I jumped out and quickly helped Mary out, while Greg assisted Cassandra. Walking toward the plane, I carried my suitcase and noticed I was the only one with luggage. Cassandra had a small handbag, but Mary wasn't carrying anything, not even a phone. It struck me how disconnected she seemed. Once we boarded the jet, I found a seat, and Mary sat across from me while Cassandra settled beside me. She appeared more composed now, ready to embrace whatever came next. Ben and Greg took their places at the front. Just like before, there was no safety announcement, the engines roared to life, and we began to move. I could see the worry in Mary's eyes, so I reached out and took her hand. She glanced between my hand and her sister's before finally taking it firmly. As the engines roared, she closed her eyes, and I couldn't help but smile. I loved flying, and the thrill of takeoff was my favorite part. Mary finally let go of my hand as we lifted off. The flight was smooth, and I felt the plane tilt gently before leveling out. Turning to Cassandra, I spoke with determination. "I'd like to plan a vacation for everyone." Cassandra looked at me with surprise. "What do you mean, vacation?" "I have a feeling you all don't get out much," I said, relaxing my shoulders. "I want to pay for everyone to fly somewhere, either all together or in smaller groups, and take a week off. You all take care of each other, it's time someone else took care of you." Cassandra stared at me for a moment, then slowly nodded. "I can make arrangements, I'm sure." Her voice trailed off as I looked forward and caught Mary smiling at me. That was enough confirmation for me to know the others would be on board with the idea. It seemed like Cassandra had found her footing, but the others needed a break. The rest of the flight was mostly quiet. I could sense a bit of tension in Cassandra's mood, unsure if any issues would surface later, but I focused on holding Mary's hand until we landed. As the plane taxied, Cassandra stood up, making us let go of each other. I brushed a loose strand of hair behind Mary's ear, and she smiled, a small but meaningful connection. It was interesting how shy she was despite her many interests. I thought back to that night and realized I couldn't have imagined it without meeting her in person. Hoping to avoid any more tension with Cassandra, I guided Mary off the plane. When we arrived, a limousine was waiting on the tarmac, and I caught a glimpse of Cassandra getting inside. I helped Mary into the car next to her, earning a few curious looks. "So, where are we going first?" I asked Cassandra. She gave me a stern look before collecting herself. "We're going to one of your hotels. Once we check in, a tailor will come to take Mary's measurements. I've already picked out some colors and styles for her." "That sounds good, thank you," I replied. "But how about we take a walk through some markets first? We could look for comfortable clothes and winter gear. I glanced at Mary and smiled. What do you think? I'm just happy to be here, Mary said softly. I smiled back, feeling a bit of silence settle in the car. The drive didn't take long, and it turned out that the hotel I co-owned was right at the airport, a place where upscale travelers often stayed. When we arrived and the doors opened, I felt a bit disappointed. The hotel was just an extension of the airport, its design all too familiar. I helped Mary and Cassandra out of the car, and we made our way inside. Beyond the windows, the interior looked nicer, though it still had a bright white aesthetic. There was some confusion at the front desk when Cassandra asked for Boris's old room. It seemed the company she managed continued to operate without announcing Boris's passing. After a brief conversation and a call with my lawyer, we got everything sorted out. The elevator ride was short and quiet, leading us to a simple door, the only one on our floor. After using a door card, Ben and Greg went inside to prepare the room. A moment later, Ben appeared at the door and nodded without saying anything. Cassandra stepped in, and I smiled at Mary before following. If I had to describe the room in one word, it would be comfortable. The main area featured soft carpets and several couches. There was no television, but a nice electric fireplace added warmth. 3 doors led from the main room, indicating there was no kitchen. A small fridge held some snacks, suggesting that this place was meant for short visits. At least we weren't staying long. So when will the tailor be here? I asked Cassandra, who was settling onto one of the couches. Cassandra pulled out her phone and sent a quick message before answering. She should be here in about 10 minutes. I nodded, deciding to explore a bit. The 3 rooms off the main area were all bedrooms, each with a large, cozy bed, thick curtains, and a private bathroom. This place was clearly designed for short stays. I returned to the lounge just in time to hear a knock on the door. Ignoring Ben and Greg's soft objections, I went to open it. A middle-aged woman stood there. "Hello, I believe I've been called for a fitting," she said, looking at me expectantly. I nodded and stepped aside, letting her in. I gestured for Mary to enter the room. "This way, please," I said, pointing to the quiet woman. "Mary here needs some suits, dresses, and comfortable clothes, along with anything else she likes." As the woman walked past me, she raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my request. I wasn't sure what had surprised her. All I wanted was for Mary to have enough clothes for every occasion. If it were up to me, I would make sure she had plenty of opportunities to dress nicely in the months to come. For now, however, I had to sit with Ben and Greg while Mary, Cassandra, and the tailor went into another room. They were in there for over an hour, and when they finally returned, Cassandra was chatting with the woman who was taking notes. Mary looked a bit uneasy but managed a sly smile when our eyes met. "All right, ladies, if we're done, I'd like to go have some fun," I announced with a grin. As soon as we stepped out of the elevator, a limousine was waiting for us. I told the driver to take us to the nearest shopping center. It took about half an hour to get there. Airports are usually located a bit outside the main part of big cities, but that was fine by me. As we pulled up, I caught sight of a donut shop right at the entrance. A smile spread across my face, and I dashed inside, with my friends trailing behind. To my surprise, Mary came in right after me. "What do you want?" I asked, scanning the donut options. "Jam or custard?" she asked, pointing to the donuts. I thought for a moment. "Why don't we share?" "I don't want to anyway." Mary laughed and nodded. "Sharing sounds good." I turned to the others. "I'll have a donut with pink frosting," Ben said, grinning. "I'd like a coffee," Greg added. Only Cassandra didn't want anything. She frowned when I offered her a donut and rolled her eyes at the mention of coffee. She was nothing like her sister, who was practically bouncing with joy as the shopkeeper wrapped up our donuts. That was just the beginning of our fun. Mary and I enjoyed sharing bites of our donuts, shopping for comfy clothes, and acting younger than we were. I even took a picture of Mary and me on a children's merry-go-round. Ben and Greg seemed to be having a good time too, despite hanging back a little. The only one who wasn't enjoying herself was Cassandra. She had been quiet all day, only offering a word or two. I couldn't quite figure her out. She seemed accustomed to a more comfortable lifestyle, but it didn't seem to bring her any happiness. In contrast, Mary appeared to relish life to the fullest. As I pondered this, I walked past a pillar and suddenly bumped into someone. In that moment, a man swiftly lifted my wallet from my pocket. Luckily, Ben noticed right away. Before I knew it, he had grabbed the man by the shoulder. The man looked startled and tried to pull away, but I saw something shiny in his hand. Ben jumped back just in time as the man dropped my wallet and bolted away. My immediate concern was for Ben, who was hurt. "Somebody call for help," I shouted, pressing down on his chest to stop the bleeding. It felt like an eternity waiting for the paramedics to arrive, but it was probably only about 10 minutes. They quickly tended to Ben before transporting him to the hospital, and shortly after, the police arrived. We spent another 20 minutes answering their questions. Once they left with our information, we decided to head back to the hotel. It was routine to settle in for the night. With Ben at the hospital, Greg wanted to ensure we felt safe. As we entered our room, Cassandra's phone rang. She grimaced before hanging up. "Ben's okay," she announced, her voice lacking enthusiasm. "The knife just grazed his rib. They'll let him go in the morning." "Looks like we're staying the night then," I said, trying to keep the mood light. Cassandra sighed and collapsed onto the couch. I rolled my eyes and tried not to laugh as Mary did the same. It seemed like it would be a long night. We ordered room service for dinner, and while there was some casual conversation among the four of us, nothing too engaging came up. Cassandra was upset about not going home tonight, while the rest of us worried about Ben. After a few moments discussing our recent purchases, Mary handed some clothes to Cassandra, who mumbled, "This will work." Mary rolled her eyes and picked up a similar set of clothes. The two of them then retreated into the middle room, leaving me alone with Greg. "I guess that's it," I said. "Looks that way. Not much else to do," Greg chuckled softly. "Okay, let's get some sleep, then we can head home as soon as we can get Ben." I yawned, waving goodbye to Greg as I prepared for bed. I had just closed my eyes when the door creaked open. I silently hoped it was Mary, but felt uncertain. Sitting up, I noticed someone approaching me. "Cassandra? What's up?" I asked casually. I heard a small giggle before she sighed. "Enough is enough, James. You're a guy, I'm a girl, and I have needs." I couldn't hide my frown at her words. It was true in a way, she had needs, but they felt more physical than emotional. There wasn't any love behind it like what I felt for Mary. I was still lost in thought when Cassandra sat down beside me on the bed. I could smell the alcohol on her breath as she leaned closer, sighing. I raised my hand slightly to signal her to stop. What?" she stammered, moving back a bit. I sighed again. "Cassandra, you don't have to do this." "No, you don't understand. I really want to," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Cassandra," I said gently, touching her cheek, "your sister told me everything. Even if we got closer, I won't marry you. I need you to stop because I don't want to lead you on." Cassandra started to tremble a bit, letting out a small breath. "Why? Why not? What's wrong with me?" I reached forward and pulled her into my arms. Her head rested on my chest as I rubbed her back gently. I then laid her down beside me and covered her with a blanket. Once she was warm, I let her go. "Cassandra, there's nothing wrong with you. You're a wonderful person, young, smart, and capable," I reassured her, my heart aching for her vulnerability. I wanted to offer her comfort, but I couldn't let it go beyond that. "You're incredibly talented, and I truly hope you'll stay with us for a long time," I said, trying to convey the sincerity in my voice. "You don't have to feel obligated to marry me. I want you to be happy, and that happiness doesn't have to include me." Mary's voice was soft, almost breaking as she replied, "That's not fair." I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me. I stood up and turned away, struggling to find the right words. Without saying anything more, I left the room, not wanting to push her away but feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily in my chest. Back in the lounge, I found myself staring at Mary's door, wondering if she was asleep. A part of me considered knocking on Greg's door, but I hesitated, unsure of what I would say. Eventually, I lay down on the couch and let sleep take me. "I'm sorry," I heard Cassandra's voice, faint and gentle. I woke up with a start, confused at first. Then I noticed that Cassandra wasn't near me. "Oh, Cass," I murmured, turning to see her sitting with Greg. He leaned down, whispering something to her that made her smile. A sense of warmth spread through me at the sight, but it quickly faded, replaced by an uneasy feeling. Their bond was clear, and I couldn't shake the thought that she might be jeopardizing that connection by focusing on me instead. I forced a smile and tried to ignore their quiet conversation. A few minutes later, I heard Greg's door click shut. Unsure of whether Cassandra was still in the room, I waited quietly, pondering what might happen next. Just as I considered getting up and heading to bed, I felt someone sit down beside me on the couch. "Part of me wants to be angry with you," Cassandra said softly, "but I know you're trying to do the right thing. Just keep being that person. My sister cares about you a lot. She deserves happiness and love." As she spoke, I felt a light touch on my arm, and then she quietly stood and left the room. I was feeling tired and achy when another person settled next to me. Blinking against the brightness of the room, I rubbed my eyes and turned to see Mary sitting there, her expression calm. "You slept out here," she observed quietly. I yawned and nodded. "Yeah, this couch isn't as comfy as it looks." "Why?" she asked, her voice steady. I sighed, feeling the pressure of the moment. I needed some space to think, and I sensed that Mary understood. She sat beside me, her eyes searching mine, uncertainty flickering in her gaze. Instead of saying anything that might feel too intense, she simply rested her head on my shoulder. Her presence was soothing in the quiet room, and we sat in silence, the air thick with unspoken tension. Gently, I wrapped my arm around her, hoping to make her feel safe. Mary leaned in closer, resting her head against my chest, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt right. The calmness of the moment felt special in its simplicity, requiring no elaborate words or gestures. After a while, Mary pulled back slightly, her expression softening. We exchanged a small, understanding smile, acknowledging that sometimes just being there for one another was enough. Yet, something felt off, and I paused, realizing the moment was veering in a direction I hadn't anticipated. Taking a deep breath, I created some space between us and looked at her. "Mary," I said gently, choosing my words with care, "we need to stop." Her gaze met mine briefly, and she nodded, her face reflecting a whirlwind of emotions. Slowly, I let go of her, ensuring the moment didn't escalate further. The air felt heavy, but I knew this was the right choice. We shared a knowing glance before I turned away, allowing her the time she needed to collect herself. As I moved toward the door, I paused and added, "It's important to take things slow. Let's not rush into anything we're not ready for." The feelings between us were powerful, but I understood that some things needed to change. I stepped back, creating a bit of distance, and noticed confusion in her eyes as I released her hands. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, wanting to gauge how she felt. Mary looked at me, and though the tension still lingered, her expression softened. She looked down for a moment, lost in thought, before finally nodding. I saw a glimmer in her eyes, but they weren't filled with sadness, rather, they reflected mixed feelings that were difficult to decipher. Without saying much, I reached out and pulled her into a gentle hug. The warmth between us felt comforting, and for a moment, we simply stayed like that, quiet and connected. After some time, Mary looked up at me, her tears gone, replaced by a small, shy smile. "I just wanted to feel valued," she whispered. I nodded, understanding her without needing to ask for more. "You are important, Mary. You don't have to prove anything." We shared a quiet moment, and I realized our connection was built on understanding and mutual respect, and that was more than enough for now. "Come on," I said, remembering what I had heard about taking care of each other. Without waiting for a response, I gently picked her up. She felt light against me as she pressed into my embrace. I carried her to her door, which she opened once we reached it. Once inside her room, I set her down carefully. A moment later, I lifted her again and took her to the bathroom, where I placed her back on her feet. She didn't step away, which made me smile. I turned on the shower. It took a moment to warm up, but when it was ready, I guided her under the water. For the next few minutes, I took care of her with gentle attention. As we finished, I must have done well, for Mary wanted to return the favor. After drying off in a similar way, we shared a sweet moment before she led me back to her bedroom. We climbed under the sheets and cuddled together. "How did you know?" Mary asked quietly, curiosity shining in her eyes. I sighed and smiled. "I accidentally walked in on you." This caught her attention, and she sat up, looking into my eyes. "What do you mean?" "I brought you a gift on my first business trip," I explained. "I found your room and went to see you." Confusion flickered across her face as I continued. "When I got to your door, I heard you say something about not wanting to feel that way again. I was worried someone had upset you." Mary's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and understanding. As I spoke, I realized just how much our paths had intertwined, and the connection we shared had grown into something deeper than either of us had anticipated. As I opened the door, Mary's eyes widened in surprise. "You saw that, didn't you?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and curiosity. I nodded slowly, and before I could say anything more, I noticed a book lying on the floor, the one she had dropped in the library. I picked it up and started reading, eager to learn more about her interests. But before I could gather my thoughts, she kissed me, catching me completely off guard. "Please, just let me be with you. I want to do anything to stay by your side," she said, her sincerity melting my heart. A smile crept across my face as I pulled her closer, turning to face her. Gently stroking her cheek, I confessed, "Mary, from the first time I heard your voice, I felt a strong connection. I wanted to get to know you better, and now I never want to let you go." Her face lit up with joy as she snuggled into me, and before we knew it, we both drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's warmth. A sound jolted me awake, a door creaking open. I shot up, and Mary jumped slightly beside me. As we turned to see who it was, we found Cassandra standing there, looking a bit unsure but managing a small smile. "Good morning. I have some clothes for you, James." "I need to get dressed," she said, hinting for me to give her some privacy. I held out my hand, and after a brief pause, Cassandra handed me my jeans, turning her back so I could change. Quickly, I stood up and slipped into the comfortable denim. Before stepping away, I leaned over and gave Mary a quick gesture of affection, a light brush of my lips against her forehead. I wanted to give them some time alone, so I stepped out of the room and found Greg and Ben waiting for me in the hallway. "Ben, it's great to see you're doing well. How are you feeling?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "I'm good, James," he replied with a smile. "Just need to take it easy for a couple of weeks. I've got some medicine if I need it." "And what about your guard duties?" I inquired. Ben beamed again. "We have a new person starting tomorrow. I'll train him and then take some time off to recover." I nodded appreciatively and then turned to Greg. "I need to talk to you." Greg looked a bit surprised but followed me into my empty bedroom. Once inside, I got straight to the point. Okay, I'll be honest. I wasn't asleep last night. I saw you with Cassandra. Greg shifted uncomfortably and cleared his throat. Yes, sir. Is there a problem? There's no problem, Greg. I've never been involved with her, I'm interested in someone else, I explained. If things go well between you and Cassandra, just let me know if you need some time off or a break or something. Greg seemed taken aback. Sir. It's James. And unless you need something, I'd like to get dressed before we head home, I added with a grin. He nodded, still looking a bit flustered, and quickly left the room. I found a simple cotton shirt to wear with my jeans and slipped on some comfortable shoes. Dressed and ready, I made my way back to the lounge. To my delight, it looked like someone had ordered breakfast. Ben and Greg were already seated, so I served food for all 5 of us. Just as I plated the last of the French toast, Mary stepped out of her room with Cassandra. She looked calm and offered me a small smile, while Cassandra seemed a bit confused, likely wondering about the morning's earlier events. Food has a magical way of easing tension, and once I served everyone, we began to eat. Cassandra, how is our health coverage? I asked, wanting to ensure my team was taken care of. Cassandra took a moment to chew before replying, it's pretty good, depending on your salary. I glanced at Ben, who was enjoying his meal. I want everyone working in my home to have the best coverage. This includes their families, if they have any. From now on, I'll cover any extra costs. I also want any expenses from the last year to be reimbursed. Cassandra stared at me in disbelief for a moment before nodding slowly. Ben looked pleased, and even Mary smiled at the news. The only one who didn't show much emotion was Greg. He quickly glanced at Cassandra before returning to his food. I didn't want to pry, but I had a feeling Greg might not have anyone to cover. After we finished eating, the 5 of us gathered our things and headed back to the plane. Boarding took a bit longer than expected. Our security led us from my home, but we still had to pass through airport security before heading to the tarmac. Once we were on board and settled into our seats, I noticed Mary sitting next to me. Remembering that she was a bit nervous about flying, I quickly grabbed my suitcase and opened it up. I took out the teddy bear I had bought for her and turned back, lifting the armrest to pull her close. Holding the teddy against her chest, I waited for her to see it. Oh, she exclaimed with excitement, her eyes sparkling as she waved at me. This is what I wanted to give you that day. As she realized what it was, her face turned a soft shade of red. Without saying a word, she hugged the teddy bear tightly and snuggled closer under my arm as the plane began to taxi down the runway. I couldn't help but think about my life now. After losing the things I once cherished, I finally had someone special who made it all worthwhile. I hoped my parents were together somewhere, happy, like I felt at that moment. As the engines roared to life, Mary tensed up, burying her face in my shoulder for comfort. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her relax a little while the plane climbed into the sky. Once we were flying smoothly, I remembered our earlier conversation. Cassandra, I said, wanting her attention. Yes, James? She replied calmly. For emergencies and quick trips, should we think about getting a helicopter? Cassandra paused, considering my question. That might be a good idea. The pilot we hired for this plane, she pointed to the cockpit, can also fly helicopters. She was a bit disappointed when Boris said no. That's great, I said with a smile. See if she can train other pilots. If not, find 2 staff members and send them for training. I leaned back in my seat, wrapping my arms around Mary's shoulders again. I had learned that the nearest airport was a couple of hours away from home, but there was a town much closer. Having a helicopter option made sense for emergencies. The sound of the wheels hitting the runway brought me back to reality. I must have dozed off for a bit, But the comforting weight of Mary beside me reminded me that everything was changing for the better. As the flight continued, I felt Mary still cuddled against me, her warmth a comforting presence. I stretched slightly and noticed Cassandra pulling her hand away from Greg, who wore a neutral expression. I sighed, feeling a mix of concern and curiosity. "Cassandra, whatever's happening between you and Greg, you don't have to hide it from me. This is about your happiness." She glanced up at me, and I noticed a single tear trickle down her cheek. Greg's serious demeanor softened as he wrapped her in his arms, offering her solace. Mary watched them, her smile brightening as she observed her sister finally finding some peace. After everything Cassandra had endured to keep Mary safe, it was heartwarming to see a glimmer of hope. Later that evening, I settled into my office, preparing for the night ahead. I had sent Cassandra an advertisement for an Airbus H130, a decision I felt was wise. However, I knew the final choice would ultimately be in the hands of the pilot. Just as I was about to dive back into my work, there was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," I called, looking up to see Mary enter, pushing a small cart with my meal. "I thought you had the day off," I said with a smile. She blushed, glancing down for a moment. "I just wanted to see you." Her words made me pause, and I walked over, gently lifting her chin to meet my gaze. "Mary, you don't need a reason to visit me," I said softly, offering her a warm smile. Her face softened, and she nodded, a small smile creeping onto her lips. I wanted her to feel free to make her own choices, to know that her presence was always welcome. "If you ever feel unsure, just know you can speak up," I added gently. Mary returned my smile and nodded, and we shared a quiet moment of understanding. Just as she turned to leave with the cart, I called her name, prompting her to pause and look back at me with a gentle smile. "Thank you, Mary," I said sincerely, grateful for her presence. With a nod, she stepped out, leaving a peaceful feeling lingering in the air. I reached out and gently touched my cheek, recalling how serene she seemed moments ago. "You seemed like you were drifting off," I remarked softly, wanting to bring her back to the moment. Mary simply smiled, calm and content. "I'll be in my room after dinner. You're welcome to join me if you want," she said before departing. Turning back to my desk, I focused on the meal in front of me. Tonight, it was steak with pepper gravy and sweet potato wedges, a simple yet delightful dinner. My stomach growled eagerly, and I made a mental note to express my gratitude to whoever had prepared it. The food was always exceptional, a wonderful blend of comfort and flavor. As I savored my meal, thoughts crossed my mind about how to show my appreciation to the staff. Perhaps I could join them for a meal or improve their dining area. It seemed like a solid idea. With that in mind, I enjoyed the rest of my dinner, grateful for the peaceful evening. Once I finished eating, I took my dishes back to the kitchen, which was quiet at this hour. The staff must have been wrapping up their meals, leaving me in a brief moment of solitude. I took a moment to gather my thoughts before heading back to my room, knowing the evening was just beginning. When I returned to my room, excitement and anticipation bubbled within me. After a brief pause, I decided to take a shower. The warm water enveloped me, soothing my muscles and washing away the day's worries. Just as I started to relax, I noticed someone had slipped into the bathroom. Turning, I was met with Mary's shy smile. "I heard the shower, so I thought I could come in," she said, looking a bit unsure. I smiled back warmly. "My room is always open to you. You're welcome anytime." Mary relaxed at my words, and we shared a quiet moment together. We spent some time helping each other tidy up, pleased to ensure everything was just right. Once we dried off, Mary appeared energized, a little breathless from our playful interactions. With a gentle touch, I led her from the bathroom towards the bed, her excitement palpable. "What was your safe word again?" I asked, wanting to confirm our lines of communication. "Deceit," she replied softly. "Very good," I said with a kind smile. I picked up a pillow and set it aside to reveal our plans for the evening. "Kneel, please," I directed. "Yes," Mary responded eagerly, quickly getting into position. I took some rope and carefully guided her hands behind her back, securing them comfortably. I was mindful to ensure she felt both secure and excited. After taking my time, I helped her to her feet and turned her to face me. Her rosy cheeks and bright smile reassured me. "Is this okay?" I asked, checking in with her. She nodded, her smile widening. "Good," I replied, giving her a soft kiss. "Now please get on the bed and lie down comfortably." Mary nodded in agreement, and I assisted her as she settled onto the pillows, making sure she was comfortable. "Now, just let me know if you feel uneasy at all. I'm going to continue getting things ready," I said gently, brushing her cheek with my hand. She smiled and leaned into my touch, nodding. I leaned in to place a gentle kiss on her forehead before reaching for another piece of rope. I quickly tied additional knots, ensuring she remained comfy. With everything prepared, I picked up a blindfold, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. She helped me fasten it securely before relaxing back onto the bed. I took a moment to give her a soft kiss, then focused on checking her comfort, letting my hands glide over her shoulders and arms. As I gently ran my hands along her legs, I watched her reactions closely. Mary responded with a slight shiver but remained calm. "We should talk about the future," I said softly. She nodded, her expression focused and attentive. I smiled at her, feeling grateful for the trust she placed in me. "I'm glad we can talk like this," I added, keeping the conversation light yet sincere. As we shared this moment, I felt a deep sense of comfort between us. It was important to maintain a connection built on understanding and respect. "Let's take things one step at a time," I suggested, eager to ensure we both felt comfortable as we navigated this new territory together. Mary's demeanor softened, and I could sense her relaxing more, buoyed by the warmth of our conversation. We took a moment, both of us reflecting on our future, filled with hope and shared dreams. I gently placed my hands on her sides, and she shifted slightly but didn't say a word. The air was thick with unspoken feelings, and I waited patiently, allowing the calmness to grow between us. "Is everything okay?" I asked softly, giving her the space to respond. Mary nodded, her breathing steady. "Yes," she whispered, her voice quiet yet calm. We sat in silence, savoring the moment together. I wanted to ensure she felt comfortable, that our connection was built on mutual respect and understanding. After a short pause, I stood up and moved to the other side of the room, mentally preparing for the rest of the evening. Mary's quiet presence reminded me that connection and good communication were essential in building our relationship on trust. The evening flowed smoothly, filled with a sense of closeness and calm. I noticed the excitement flickering in her eyes as I approached her again, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you need a moment?" I asked gently. Mary nodded, looking focused yet a bit tense. She seemed ready to continue but was still processing everything. "Just remember, this is your choice," I reassured her with a smile. As we moved forward, I kept a steady pace, ensuring the atmosphere felt relaxed. Mary was breathing evenly, and I focused on maintaining our connection, making sure she felt at ease. We took our time, moving forward together. Mary's responses softened, and she began to feel more comfortable, finding peace in our quiet support. Once things settled down, I helped her get cozy, making sure she felt relaxed. We shared a peaceful space, both recognizing how important trust and communication were to us. "The atmosphere feels so light," I remarked, ensuring she was comfortable before giving her a moment to breathe. "I'll run us a bath," I said with a warm smile. I got off the bed and headed to the bathroom, eager to prepare a soothing experience for both of us. I quickly checked the bathtub controls, which were more intricate than those for the shower. I set the temperature and adjusted the water level, adding some light scents and bubbles. A moment later, water began flowing, and I felt pleased that it would fill up quickly. When I returned to the room, I found Mary still there, propped up on her elbows, watching me. "Come on," I laughed, moving closer. The bath will be cold if we don't hurry. Nope. It will stay warm, she replied playfully. I laughed again as we moved nearer, enjoying each other's company. I think the bath is ready now, I said, my excitement growing. Mary smiled back at me, and I took her hand, guiding her to the bathroom. The tub was already filled, and bubbles spilled over the sides like fluffy clouds. I helped Mary step into the warm water, and she gasped in delight as she relaxed. Once she settled in comfortably, I climbed in after her, letting the warmth envelop us. The bubbles made it easy to glide my hands along her arms and legs, but I started to worry she might doze off. So, gently, I helped her out of the tub, watching as she demonstrated how to drain it. We then stepped into the dryer together, which felt a bit awkward, and since it wasn't very effective, we decided to dry off separately. Afterward, I took Mary's hand and led her back to the bed. She waited while I cleaned up our things, and once I put everything back in the wardrobe, I returned to find Mary putting her clothes back on. "Mary?" I called softly. She turned to me with a smile. "I thought you were going to bed." I felt a little uncertain. "I hoped you would stay the night with me, but if you want to go." Before I could finish, she adjusted her skirt. I gently took her hand and guided her onto my bed. She settled on the far side, and I climbed in next to her. It felt strange. I had shared a bed with someone for years, but now I felt nervous with Mary here. I turned off the lights and reached for her. When my hand touched her shoulder, she moved closer, snuggling against my chest. "Your heart is beating fast," she said softly. I took a breath to calm myself and held her closer, wanting to look into her eyes. "I'm nervous," I admitted quietly. Mary laughed softly, her smile giving me confidence. "What do you have to be nervous about?" "Because I'm in love with you." "What?" she exclaimed, her eyes wide. "I followed you to the kitchen every day since I first heard you. The day I found you in trouble made me really angry. Please, marry me." "What, master?" "My dear friend, please be my wife." Mary sniffled and lay down against me, resting her head on my shoulder. The moment I felt her tremble with quiet tears, I wrapped her in my arms. I could feel warm tears soaking into my shoulder, and honestly, I wasn't sure what to do next. She hadn't pushed me away, but she was crying and still close to me. "Mary, I need to know how you feel," I said softly. She lifted her head from my chest and looked into my eyes, her bright smile shining through, even with her eyes still red from crying. "Master, when I'm here like this, please call me your devoted one. I'm yours forever, master. I love you so much. Please hold me close, always." Before I could fully react, she moved in, resting her forehead against mine. Inside, I felt a rush of happiness wash over me, but then I noticed how vulnerable she seemed. She seemed to sense it too as she pulled away slightly. "Master," she said with a sniffle, teasingly, "it seems you have a little problem." I just smiled. "Well, maybe you can help with that." Her eyes lit up as she stepped closer. "Master James, I love you." I felt my heart swell as we shared that moment. This felt significant, a special connection between us. I gently held her, feeling warmth radiate between us. She stroked her hair back and took a few deep breaths. "Master, please, I'm almost there," she said earnestly. I smiled back, heart racing. "How many children do you see in our future?" She paused, deep in thought. "Master, as many as you want, but at least 2, a boy and a girl." "That sounds perfect," I said, wrapping my arms around her, ready to embrace whatever the future held for us. "It's wonderful," I said, sharing a gentle kiss with Mary. In that moment, I could feel her excitement as we embraced, a wave of joy and connection washing over us. When we pulled apart, she smiled brightly, holding on to the sweet feeling we had just shared. I remembered being 16, long ago, holding Mary close and returning her smile. After the wedding, We'll start dreaming about our future together, I said softly, my heart swelling with hope. Her bright smile brought me comfort, and I hoped to always deserve the trust and love she showed me. Later, when I woke up, I found that Mary was already up and getting ready for the day. She turned to me, a warm smile lighting up her face. "Good morning." "Good morning," I replied, feeling grateful for that quiet moment we shared. As Mary started to leave the room, she looked back at me. "I'll bring breakfast when it's ready." I sat up and smiled, excitement bubbling inside me. "Let's make it together. I want to help too." Mary paused, her eyes shimmering with emotion. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me in a warm hug. "Thank you," she whispered, clearly moved. I gave her a gentle kiss on the forehead, reassuring her that we were a team. "Always, Mary," I replied. She smiled through her tears, showing me just how much this moment meant to her. We stood in silence for a little while, both of us feeling the strength of our connection. As Mary finished getting ready, I grinned and added, "And yes, you can keep some of your things here. This is your home too." With that, we felt ready to face the day, knowing we would support each other. "But as my future wife, I'd like you to stay close," I said gently, touching her head as she sniffled a bit, reassured that she was okay. Mary smiled quickly and then left the room. Once I got dressed, I headed for the kitchen, surprised to find only Kenneth there. "Good morning. I'm not sure where Mary is today, she's usually on time," he said earnestly. I thought for a moment before smiling. "My fiancée is probably just getting ready. I'll start without her." About half a minute later, Kenneth looked surprised. "Fiancée?" I turned back to see his shock just as Mary walked in. She noticed him staring. "Sir James," she said playfully. "Mary, you don't need to call me sir in front of others," I replied, chuckling. Mary smiled and walked into my arms, softly saying, "I love you." "Wow," Kenneth whispered, clearly astonished. Mary and I laughed together, continuing our morning routine. I couldn't help but smile as she hummed a cheerful tune. Every time I turned to hand something to Kenneth, he looked amazed. This continued as I pushed the cart filled with food into the dining room, where the staff was gathered, chatting among themselves. A few of them smiled and greeted me as I helped set the table. Once I finished, I reached for Mary's hand, and she took it without hesitation. I led her to 2 empty seats and pulled out her chair. She blushed as I gave her a gentle kiss on the cheek before sitting down. That's when I noticed the room had gone quiet, and everyone was looking at us. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my future wife, Miss Matthews," I announced, holding Mary's hand proudly. The room was silent for a few seconds until Frank broke the quiet by starting to clap. Soon, everyone joined in, and I smiled as I held Mary's hand while she tried to hide her face, though her joy was evident. The rest of the meal went on as usual. Once the excitement died down, conversations flowed, and we enjoyed our meal. Throughout the breakfast, Mary and I sat quietly, holding hands. After we finished eating, I helped carry the dishes back to the kitchen, stealing a sweet moment with Mary before heading to find Frank. A couple of hours later, Frank left my office with a list of changes for the property. The first was about making room for the helicopter, and the second involved improvements for the dining room and staff living areas. As I looked through my emails, I heard a knock on the door. Before I could answer, Cassandra walked in, looking a bit worried and even nervous. "Cassandra, are you okay?" I asked her, concerned. She shook her head and sat down in the chair Frank had just vacated. "I never had a chance with you, did I?" I closed my eyes and shook my head slowly. "Honestly, no. You're lovely, truly, but I've been hurt before, and I felt you weren't completely honest about wanting me. Besides, it's not me you really want, is it?" Cassandra turned pale and shook her head. "Greg is the lucky one." "What?" I said, surprised. Cassandra looked shocked, and I sighed. I wasn't asleep on that couch. Well, I was, but I woke up when you started talking. Cassandra groaned and covered her face with her hands. Don't worry. I liked Greg. He seems like a good man. Just make sure you have someone to fill in when you take time off to marry him. Cassandra rolled her eyes. After all this, she sighed and looked up at me. Just promise you'll take care of my sister. I promise I will love, protect, and care for your sister for as long as I live, I said, placing my hand over my heart. Cassandra smiled and stood up, nervously twisting her fingers. Can I have a hug? I stood and walked around the desk, opening my arms. Cassandra stepped into my embrace, and I held her gently. Is this what you wanted? I asked softly. I never had a brother, she replied. It's nice to have family again. I smiled and let her pull away. Cassandra paused before adding, I forgot to tell you. I approved the purchase of the helicopter. I was thinking of buying a new one, but that would take too long. This is easier for getting to Mary's court hearing. I frowned. When is that? The helicopter or the hearing? Both, she said quickly. The helicopter should arrive tomorrow. The pilot is staying over, and we'll fly back to town the next day for the hearing. I nodded, thanking her as she left. It was good that things were moving so fast. Sitting back at my desk, I started scrolling through my emails. Most were just updates from the companies I owned, but one at the bottom made me pause. My dearest James, it began. It's been so long since I've heard from you. Not a day goes by that I don't regret how things ended between us. I never meant what I said, and I hope you know that. That's why I dropped the lawsuit. I still care for you, James, and I. Let's give it another shot, Michelle's words echoed in my mind as I read her message one more time. We can be together again. We were happy before, and we can be happy again. Just give me another chance to show you how much I care. Always yours, Michelle Matthews. I sighed, contemplating her words when Ben, the on-site guard, approached Cooper with a smile. So, that's it, he said casually, before stepping toward the door. Suddenly, the piercing sound of an alarm rang out from the computer, jolting me from my thoughts. What now? I murmured to myself, pulling Cooper along as we hurried to the office. As we entered, we found James sitting at his desk, staring at a broken window with glass scattered all around. Sir, are you all right? Ben asked, concern etched on his face as he cautiously stepped into the room. James looked up, his expression taut with frustration. Just then, Mary rushed in, her eyes wide with worry. James, she exclaimed, rushing to his side. As she hugged him tightly, I could see the tension in his shoulders start to ease, and for a moment, everything felt like it might be okay. Ben glanced at Cooper, whispering, we can do introductions later. It's almost lunchtime anyway, you can meet everyone then. Are you okay? Mary asked softly, her gaze searching for reassurance. I locked eyes with her, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. I care about you, I replied, my voice steady. Mary smiled warmly, her hand finding mine and providing an unexpected rush of warmth. Whatever is bothering you, we'll face it together, she said, her confidence grounding me. I took a deep breath, trying to let go of the tension that had built up. I won't let this get to me, I assured her, feeling calmer in her presence. She smiled again, her support unwavering. Take your time. We'll talk about it when you're ready. Together, we stepped away from the chaos, allowing ourselves a brief moment of calm. With Mary by my side, I felt prepared to tackle whatever came next. I hugged her gently. I'm sorry, I murmured, sensing her confusion. What's wrong? She asked, her brow furrowed in concern. Mary, if you want me to be more confident, I can do that. If you need a stronger presence from me, I'm here for that too. I just don't want my stress to spill over onto you, I explained, my heart open. Mary looked thoughtful for a moment. But you're not hurting me. I just need to feel a bit more in control sometimes. It's something I really want. I understand, I said with a smile, my admiration for her growing. That's why I want to help you through these moments. I appreciate that, she replied, her eyes sparkling. I want to support you too. I gently touched her cheek, letting the moment linger for a while. Why don't you show me what you can do? I suggested as I took a seat. Almost immediately, Mary settled in comfortably beside me, a grin spreading across her face. Is this all right? She asked playfully, inching closer. I nudged her playfully, and she gasped lightly. You're wonderful, I said, my tone steady as I reveled in how she made me feel. If you want to make this more of a challenge, I have ideas, she said, her grin widening. That thought filled me with joy. Even as I found comfort in her presence, Mary was determined to ensure everything felt right between us. I gently held her in my arms, feeling the serenity wash over me. So, what happened? Mary asked, running her fingers through my hair. My ex-wife wants to get back together, I replied honestly, not wanting to hide anything from her. Mary continued to stroke my hair, her movements soothing. Did you respond before checking your laptop? I chuckled softly. No, I didn't. I hardly understood it at first. By the time I thought about it again, I was so upset that I forgot all about it. I didn't mean for it to end up broken. Was there anyone outside? Mary leaned over to peek out the window. Nope, everything was taken care of yesterday, the lawn was mowed, and the hedges trimmed the day before. I smiled, feeling warm and safe with her. In that moment, I realized I wanted to marry her, no matter the chaos surrounding us. I had found peace in her gentle company. Come on, you should change clothes and maybe freshen up, I said, trying to lighten the mood. I handed her my shirt as she adjusted her skirt, noticing how she seemed to brighten up. I'll wash up in my old room. I haven't brought any clothes upstairs yet, she replied quickly, leaning in to give me a kiss on the cheek. I watched her dash toward the door, but she froze as someone appeared on the other side. After a brief moment of surprise, she hurried out of the room. Moments later, Cassandra walked in, her eyes darting around curiously. James? She said, glancing between us. I raised my hands defensively. It was her idea, everything was mutual. Just ask her, I won't get in the way, I said, hoping to diffuse any tension. Cassandra noticed the glass scattered on the floor. I might just do that. So, about the window. I nodded, bracing myself. My ex-wife sent me an email. She wants to reconcile. Cassandra let out a small laugh, quickly muffling it with a cough, but I could see her struggling not to smile. I guess the window got in the way of your response? Pretty much, I grumbled, half serious. Lucky for you, we have supplies around. If we had to order a window, it would take days to replace. Just don't make a habit of it. Whenever we get glass, some of it always ends up broken, she said, shaking her head, but her tone was light. Got it, I replied with a chuckle. Unless you need anything else, I'm heading for a shower. Cassandra wrinkled her nose at me and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. My ex wanting to get back together wasn't really an option, it hadn't been before, and now, with Mary, everything felt different. She had shown me that she could be quite strong when necessary, and I needed to think about how to handle this situation. An hour later, I found myself in the kitchen, enjoying a late lunch with Mary. We had missed the main meal, so she quickly whipped up something delicious. From what I could tell, it was a unique dish, eggs, onions, and tomatoes, with some kind of spiced meat that tasted a bit like ham. It had all come from a local source, so I knew it was fresh. By the way, I mentioned between bites, I've been told I can't go back to my office for the rest of the day. A new laptop is being set up for me with all my old files transferred. Ben's in charge of the transfer. Mary nodded, her expression brightening as she watched me enjoy the meal. The flavors danced on my tongue, reminding me of the unexpected joys that could emerge from chaos, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for her presence. Mary and I spent a peaceful evening together, simply enjoying each other's company. I wasn't in the mood for anything too exciting, and she seemed perfectly content just being by my side. Her caring nature felt overwhelming at times, but I knew I needed it. The next morning, I woke up to find Mary still nestled in my arms. She had a gentle way of waking me up. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice pulling me from my dreams. As my eyes opened, I instinctively pulled her closer and whispered, "I love you." Mary made a soft sound, and I smiled, holding her tightly. "Don't you need to get up?" I asked. She shook her head, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Frank and Cassandra said I could take today, tomorrow, and maybe the next day off." "Really? Today for you, tomorrow for a court appearance, and the next day just in case you need it?" I replied, surprised. She nodded, looking serious. "Yes. But I don't want to take a day off just for you." I sighed, wanting her to know I cared. "You can do what you want. It's great to hear you say that, because what I really want is for you to stay by my side as we face this together," she said, her voice steady and firm. I pulled her close, wanting to offer her the support she needed. "I've always been here for you," I assured her softly. In the courtroom later, Mary maintained her calm demeanor as she testified. After the incident, Mr. Matthews stepped in. "There was a short struggle, but he managed to handle the situation and brought me to safety," she explained. The lawyer then asked, "Did the defendant receive any medical care?" "Yes," Mary replied, unwavering. "Mr. Matthews made sure he was safe before looking for help. We then met Frank and the security team who took over." Suddenly, a young man shouted angrily from the gallery, hurling accusations. "You're lying. You're just covering for him." The judge quickly silenced him, restoring order to the court. Mary steadied herself and continued confidently, "What I choose to do with my life is none of your business." As the court deliberated, the atmosphere felt thick with tension, but Mary's strength radiated through it. When the verdict was finally announced, guilty, it felt like a weight had been lifted. The defendant was sentenced to community service, and Mary breathed a sigh of relief. After leaving the courtroom, we held hands as we walked back to the hotel. I noticed Mary's calmness beginning to fade. Once we were inside, her emotions poured out, and I wrapped my arms around her, comforting her as she cried. "You're safe now," I whispered gently, hoping to help her feel secure after everything she had endured. Mary took a deep breath, slowly regaining her composure. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice full of appreciation. We stood together, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them side by side. Looking at me with teary eyes, Mary spoke shakily. I didn't expect them to ask so many personal questions. It made me feel exposed, embarrassed. I stepped closer, wanting to soothe her. "Mary, you're so strong. You faced it all head on." Her eyes reflected doubt, so I continued, "Today, I saw a brave woman rise above something difficult. You've come out of this stronger, and you don't need to carry the weight of what others have done." Mary nodded, her eyes glistening with tears, but I could see her strength returning. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. It had been 3 months since Mary agreed to marry me. Life had thrown us its fair share of challenges, but we were learning to navigate them together. We had our disagreements, especially about her desire to keep working. I understood her need for independence, so we found ways to make it work, hiring extra help when needed. Over time, our relationship had deepened. We made it a priority to communicate openly, always supporting each other in our choices, whether it was managing the household or planning for our future. We faced it all as a team. Tomorrow was our wedding day, and there was an undeniable sense of excitement in the air. We decided to take the day off to enjoy some quiet time together before the whirlwind of celebrations began. As we prepared for this new chapter, I knew that whatever challenges came our way, we would face them together. Mary always found comfort in setting clear boundaries, and we worked hard to respect those. Today was no different. Though our trust in each other had only grown stronger, I could see her relax, feeling completely secure as we enjoyed the calming sounds we had chosen together. She held a small item in her hand, a signal we had agreed upon that gave her control whenever she needed it. I moved quietly around her, noticing how calm and steady her breathing had become. The peaceful sounds in the background, along with the stillness of the room, made the moment feel serene. It was about trust, connection, and understanding. As I stood by her side, I checked everything, making sure it was just right. There was no rush, only patience as I focused on keeping her comfortable and at ease. We had worked hard to build this foundation of respect and care, and today was a reminder of the deep bond we shared, rooted in mutual trust. The simple moments, filled with peace, were what we both cherished. With everything in place, I stayed focused on ensuring she felt safe and supported, knowing that our connection was built on trust and understanding. Just a moment later, she began to shake with excitement. An hour later, I gently placed her on her bed. Part of me wanted to keep her in my room for the night, but I knew it would only cause problems later with Cassandra. I had heard about difficult brides, but I wasn't prepared for a challenging sister-in-law. Cassandra had taken charge of everything: the dress, the cake, the flowers, the guest list. It was all up to her. Mary and I just went along with her choices, as long as Mary was happy. With a soft touch to my sleeping beauty, I returned to my own bed. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a knock on the door. I squinted as sunlight flooded the room. The door opened a little, and Cassandra peeked in. "Oh good, Mary's in her room," I muttered, sinking back into my pillows. "No, no, no. Get up. You need to shower and dress." "In an hour," Cassandra exclaimed, her excitement contagious. "It snowed last night, just like I wanted. We'll get some amazing morning pictures of you and Mary." I groaned and pulled the sheets over my head. "Ah, I'm not ready." Cassandra raised an eyebrow, determination etched on her face. "I'm leaving now. Get up." I couldn't help but chuckle at her enthusiasm. The day ahead promised to be filled with love, laughter, and memories waiting to be made, and I knew I wouldn't want to miss a moment of it. "I'll be back in 5 minutes. If you're not in that shower, I'll make it interesting." I couldn't help but chuckle at Cassandra's playful threat. We had come a long way from our old issues. She truly was the little sister I never had. I also knew Greg had plans to propose during their honeymoon, which added an air of excitement to the day ahead. I had arranged a skiing trip for Mary and me, perfectly timed for the season. Winter had just started, and the popular spots were bustling with fresh snow. I had booked an entire resort with hot tubs and its own ski lift, even hiring a security team to look after things during the wedding, the honeymoon, and the house for the month we'd be away. Everyone was buzzing with anticipation. All right, I'm getting up, I promise," I called back, grinning. Cassandra nodded and quickly left, leaving me to gather my thoughts. By the time I stepped out of the shower, I found my bed made and my suit laid out, a simple yet elegant choice. As long as the photos turned out well and Mary was happy, I had no complaints. After dressing, I left the bedroom and found Frank waiting for me. "Come here, sir," he said, holding up a comb. "Frank, just stop it, or you won't get that raise," I replied, feigning annoyance, but I couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. "James, it's a wedding. With so many people, it's hard to keep everything organized," he said, rolling his eyes. I let Frank style my hair and pin a rose to my suit while a young man dashed around, capturing moments on camera. I tried to ignore the photographer's presence as Frank finally finished with my look. Kenneth handed me a drink, and I thanked him before making my way downstairs. It felt a bit surreal. The staff were all friends of Mary and me, so we had to hire extra help for the wedding. To add to the excitement, some military members, along with leaders and close family, had come to celebrate. I learned that many of my staff maintained long-distance relationships, a situation I wanted to address. Their happiness was important to me, and I was willing to do what I could to support them. As I finished my drink, I strolled past the warm indoor pool, but the real magic awaited outside on the patio. Just as Cassandra had mentioned, it had snowed overnight. Space heaters had been set up to create a cozy atmosphere for the wedding. Stepping outside, I was greeted by the sight of guests settling into their seats. For an event planned so meticulously, it was surprising how relaxed we all felt. Guests had arrived in the morning, but there was no set time for the ceremony. Cassandra was busy coordinating everything with Mary, and we would begin when we were ready. After all, we had paid for the entire day, timing was flexible. Frank was even the one officiating the ceremony. As I walked down the aisle, I took in the sight of all the smiling guests. It reminded me of my own wedding, which had also been filled with joy, but there had been a fair amount of political maneuvering. My parents had been thrilled to see me happy, while her family saw it as a chance to network. I even lost a few friends that day. When I reached the altar, Frank arrived with Ben and Cassandra. Ben took his place as my best man, and Cassandra looked at me with a knowing smile. "You'll do," she said, grinning. I rolled my eyes playfully, and Frank softly urged us to settle down, though I could see he was amused. The low sound of music filled the air, bringing the room to a hush. I smiled at the significance of "In the Arms of an Angel" playing in the background. When Mary appeared, I couldn't hold back my tears. She wore a stunning white dress that flowed elegantly to the floor, a veil barely concealing her radiant smile. The roses she carried matched the one pinned to my suit. She walked slowly, photographers capturing every precious moment, and I focused on the woman I loved, trying to keep my emotions in check. As Mary reached the altar, she stood across from me, and Frank began to speak. But the whole time, I was entranced by my bride. The ceremony was a beautiful celebration filled with love and joy. As I stood there, almost lost in the moment, I nearly missed my turn to say "I do." It took a gentle nudge from Ben to bring me back to reality. When Frank announced us as husband and wife, I lifted Mary's veil carefully. Tears of happiness rolled down her cheeks, mirroring my own. I cupped her face gently, brushing my thumb along her cheek before leaning in to kiss her. In that instant, everything else faded away, and it was just the two of us, wrapped in our love. Cheers and applause erupted around us, but my focus remained solely on my wife. The celebration continued late into the night, filled with laughter, delicious food, and just enough fun to make it a day to remember. Guests stayed in the rooms we had arranged, and even the catering staff joined in the festivities. Later in the evening, Greg surprised everyone by asking Cassandra to marry him, adding even more joy to the occasion. As the night began to wind down, I turned to Mary, a smile spreading across my face. "How do you feel?" I asked softly. She smiled back, her eyes shimmering with happiness. "I'm fine, dear," she replied gently. I chuckled at her calling me dear. "Huh, dear," I teased lightly, and she beamed even brighter, clearly overjoyed. We shared a peaceful moment together, realizing that this was just the beginning of our life as partners. Our connection felt stronger than ever. As the day's events unfolded, we were enveloped in the emotions of our wedding. Mary smiled at me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "How are you feeling?" I asked her gently. "I'm great, dear," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. I laughed, knowing how much it meant for us to finally be together as a married couple. We shared another quiet moment, and I held her close, savoring the comfort of being with the one I loved. As the night went on, we chatted about our future, the promises we had made, and the life we would build together. The laughter and happiness of the day still filled our hearts, and we both felt thankful for the love that had brought us to this point, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. I felt like the world had faded away, and all that mattered now was the journey ahead. Mary and I stood together, ready to face whatever challenges might come our way. Our wedding day had been a whirlwind of emotions, filled with laughter, joy, and heartfelt moments. As the night began to draw to a close, we took a quiet moment to reflect on our future together. We both knew our lives had transformed dramatically, and our bond felt unbreakable. Mary smiled at me, her eyes shimmering with love and happiness. "I love you, Mary," I whispered softly, my heart swelling with the depth of my feelings. She nodded gently, her emotions clearly overwhelming her. The future stretched out before us like a bright, inviting horizon, and we were more than ready to embrace it together. Meanwhile, in a different part of town, Michelle Matthews sat at her computer, drafting yet another email. Months had passed since her life had taken an unexpected turn, and things had not gone as she had hoped. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had left behind a life that seemed far more fulfilling than the one she now led. The man she thought would be her perfect match had turned out to be someone entirely different. He no longer prioritized her, and she found herself yearning for the stability she once had. Michelle spent her days cooking and cleaning, while he spent his weekends out with friends, enjoying life without her. As she typed out loving words, a loud knock on the front door jolted her from her thoughts. With a tired sigh, she hit send and rose to see who it was. When she opened the door, a delivery driver stood there, holding a bouquet of flowers. Surprised, she looked up at him. "Mrs. Matthews?" he asked. "Yes," Michelle replied, her curiosity piqued. The man nodded, trying to mask his fatigue. "Please sign here." Michelle quickly signed the slip, frowning as he handed her a small box along with the flowers. She stepped back, closing the door behind her. In the kitchen, she placed the bouquet on the table and inspected the box, her heart racing slightly as she noticed the note on top. It read, "To the woman of my dreams," signed simply, James. A smile spread across Michelle's face as she opened the box. Inside, she discovered 2 envelopes and a DVD. The first envelope was labeled "Read Me First," decorated with a small heart. Recognizing the handwriting, she smiled and opened it, revealing a simple message. "My dearest Michelle, please watch the DVD I sent you. It would mean so much if you did so before opening the final envelope. With all my heart, James." Feeling a mix of excitement and curiosity, Michelle slid the DVD into the player and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and for a brief moment, it was dark. Then, music began to play, one of her favorite songs. She felt a rush of happiness knowing he had thought of her. As the music filled the room, images appeared, flowers, a wedding dress, and finally, James himself, smiling brightly. Michelle's heart swelled with hope for what she thought would be a sweet message of love. But that hope quickly turned to despair when a cheerful young woman appeared beside him. Her heart sank as she watched the video, realizing the depth of James's feelings for this new woman. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she picked up the final envelope with trembling hands. Inside, she found 2 papers, one was a voucher for counseling, and the other was an ultrasound image dated just 2 weeks ago. The weight of the situation crashed down on her, and she felt the reality of her choices settle in. Hey listeners of Temptress Cheating Tales! If you enjoyed hearing this story and want to stay in the loop with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next wonderful story.